but his willingness to stand in the pocket and make late in the down throws when there are people around him with a lot of comfort. Okay, that is a really difficult trait for quarterbacks to have.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday, which means class is in session with the great Greg Cosell from NFL Films. Love talking with Greg each and every week here on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Our most popular episode is when Greg breaks down the videotape. Of course, Even Money, the betting podcast, super popular as well. Fantasy Feast, we had Joe Dolan pinch hitting the last couple days, as well as the College Draft podcast, which you can still listen to get the thoughts from both Emery and myself for Notre Dame, Georgia, which will now kick off today. We are presented by DraftKings. A little bit later in the show, I can probably let you guys know about how you can win one of these awesome press passes that I get when I'm calling these games on TV or the radio. I can sign it, send it to you in the mail. Pretty cool keepsake that none of your buddies have. Nobody else you even know has one or has ever done one, which is really a pretty cool thing. But right now, it's Greg Cosell. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, Greg. Usually we kind of go in order of when the games are taking place, but there's one game that clearly stands out far and above the rest. Now, there's other games I want to get into with you, but the game of the weekend is Sunday night. It's two 14-win teams. It's the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions, and I want to make sure we spend plenty of time on this one. So as I like to do with you, Greg, I'm going to give you a blank slate and let you take it wherever you want to start as we look at the Vikings and the Lions. Maybe we start with different sides of the ball, and what you're thinking about when the Vikings have it or the Lions have it or whatever.
Well, obviously this is a rematch because it's the final week of the season, so these teams played week 7. And they're very much similar in terms of what the coaches do on both sides of the ball. So there may be some difference in personnel. Obviously, we know about the Lions and their defensive injuries, but in terms of schematics, there's not a ton of difference. So let's just start with the Lions O and the Vikings D. We know how the Vikings play. They like to line up with a lot of pressure front looks. They blitz more than any team in the league, and by that we mean they rush 5 or more, and they often rush 6. And the last time they played week 7, Jared Goff was phenomenal versus their pressures, their 5 and 6 man pressures. I mean, he was 14 for 16 for 159 against their 5 and 6 man pressures, and he was the dominant player in that game. So that's a big factor in this game, how the Vikings want to play. Will they continue to be really aggressive with their pressures? Will they show pressure and drop out? And because they do also have a tendency to rush 3 and drop 8. Not quite as much as they did a year ago, but that's still a part of the Brian Flores game plan. And we know their run game is very, very strong. They may line up and try to be physical. Obviously, Gibbs has great speed, but he's a little more of a physical runner than people give him credit for. On the other side, the Lions have a lot of injuries, yes, but they still play man coverage and they still pressure. And that'll be interesting in this game because obviously on the outside, they're playing with different corners. Carlton Davis out for the season. They've moved Robertson, their slot corner. He's now playing outside, and they moved Branch back inside as the slot corner since Melanfonwu was now back, and he's playing safety. So it's different personnel. Their pass rush is not quite as good because of different people. You look at this and you think that the Vikings should be able to throw the ball. As long as they can protect, they should be able to throw the ball. I know there's a lot there, Ross.
Yeah, no. Do you think, Greg, it sounds like Anzalone might be back for the Lions.
In this game?
For this game. It sounds like he might be back for this game. He's listed as questionable. I guess the question is, how impactful is that against the Vikings to have him back when it seems like they throw to their receivers so much? I mean, I don't know that he'd be matched up on Hawkinson. What would be the significance of Anzalone being back in your mind?
Well, I think their linebackers are struggle a bit right now. Obviously, Campbell's a really good football player, but beyond that, they've been playing multiple linebackers next to Campbell. So that tells you right there that they don't feel like they have another linebacker, Ross, who can really play. And so they mix and match. They play Turner, they play Reeves-Maybin, they play Neiman. They've been playing multiple players next to Campbell. So if Anzalone, again, if he's back, I'd be excited for that. He's a really good football player, and we don't know how many snaps he would play. But if he's back and can truly play and can play 40, 45 snaps, you're dealing with a really good football player who many believe, you and I are not in the locker room. I know you know, Alex, but we're not in the locker room. But I think many feel he's kind of the heartbeat of that defense. So, obviously that would mean a lot. Of course, he's not matching up to Jefferson or Addison, but I would think there'd be times that he'd be involved for sure in coverage on Hawkinson.
The other question I have, I guess, Greg, which is a little bit more philosophical, and I think it's impossible for anybody to totally answer, and we know it's a marriage, we know it's both, but when you watch Darnold playing as well as he has this year, how do we know, or he's going to be a free agent, Greg, so
yes.
How do executives know how much of this performance is, hey, he's this good? Like, Darnold is this good of a quarterback, we should give him a lot of money, versus, you know what? He really is excelling because Kevin O'Connell is such a good coach. And yeah, he's probably better than he's always been, but he wouldn't necessarily be this good for some other team.
It's probably an unanswerable, but you are dealing with a guy that's very talented, 6'4", 225, and that's a trait, by the way. A lot of quarterbacks coming out of college these days are not like that. That's a trait. He's big, he's physical, he's got a really good arm, he's got mobility. I mean, there's two things to me that stand out about Darnold this year that we've not really seen from him in the past. Number one, it's pocket movement. And I'm not talking about running. I'm talking about navigating the pocket and making throws, whether he slides or climbs. And the other thing, and this I think comes from comfort and confidence within the system, and it's probably in his head, but his willingness to stand in the pocket and make late in the down throws when there are people around him with a lot of comfort. Okay, that is a really difficult trait for quarterbacks to have, particularly now in this era where quarterbacks are far more mobile and they leave the pocket. But in the NFL, at some point, you've got to stand there and you've got to make throws with people around you. And he's done that really, really well this year. I can't tell you if that's a function of Kevin O'Connell. It's a function of his comfort in the system. It's a function of natural growth as a quarterback. We don't know the answers to those questions, Ross, but those are things that stand out on film.
Yeah, and I guess what stands out to me is now I'm curious how many other quarterbacks could have really improved greatly if they just got a little bit more time and got the right coaching and, were at the right place at the right time. We talk a lot as NFL players that situation and circumstance mean a lot more than people realize for how good your career is. Where are you with who, when? Who's the other guys on the team? Who's your coach? What's the O-line like? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into the success or failure of a given player.
I mean, I can't tell you why all of a sudden he's making these tight window throws between the numbers, between the hashes, with phenomenal timing, anticipation, and ball placement that we did not see him make before. He hit Jefferson for 37 yards last week on a throw that I sat and with my remote watched it 10 times because of when he threw the ball and the tight window throw that it was. We could sit here and say, gee, that's Kevin O'Connell. I don't know, It's a really, really good NFL throw.
Let's get to some of these other games, Greg. A big one Saturday night. It's the Bengals and the Steelers. The Bengals' playoff hopes are still alive. Meanwhile, if the Steelers win, the Steelers will know whether or not they have a chance at the division. It's unlikely with the Ravens playing the Browns, hosting the Browns. But even if the Steelers don't have a chance to win the division, you'd like to think they still would very much want the 5 seed to play at Houston as opposed to having to play at Baltimore. So what's going on with the Bengals and the Steelers? Two teams in recent weeks, Greg, that feel like they're kind of going in different directions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about Joe Burrow and that pass offense, and Burrow's just been phenomenal. I mean, Burrow, it's funny. I went back and I looked at my evaluation of Burrow when he came out of college, and I thought he was an unbelievably great prospect. And the only negative I really had on Burrow was that he didn't have a power arm. But everything else, his traits were so high level, and you're seeing that right now. And he's probably added better movement ability. He was always a good athlete because I know he was a point guard in basketball in high school. He's always been a good athlete, but obviously he plays behind an O-line that's not great. So he's often forced to move, and just the comfort and ease with which he moves, Ross, and the fact that he never drops his eyes and he keeps his focus down the field. That's a much harder trait than people might think it is. And I have to tell you, I know there's a lot of conversation about MVP. I don't normally get into that at all, but being on teams, playing in the league, if you're a quarterback and you feel like you have to put up 35 every week just for your team to compete, that is a really hard deal. Troy Aikman talked about that the other night, and obviously he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. I'm not. But I can't imagine sort of the mental burden that places on you. And Burrow's had to do that literally every game this year. He knows he has to score 35 just for them to compete.
You know what I like, Greg? I like the fact that there's this many guys that have a compelling argument to be the MVP. I mean, you can make an argument for Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley and Lamar Jackson and Jared Goff and Sam Darnold and Joe Burrow. I mean, that's good. That means that means we got a lot of good players, guys playing well. That's exciting. I'm only asking you about this game, Greg, for two reasons. Number one, because it's the game I'm calling for CBS. But number two, nobody's quite sure what's going on with C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans offense. So the Texans are playing against the Titans. I don't know how much the starters will play. We haven't spoken with D'Amico Ryans yet, but he did say that the starters will play for Houston. It seems to me like he wants to get those guys feeling good or in some type of rhythm before the playoffs. I'm curious kind of what you've seen.
Yeah, C.J. Stroud, I think this has been one of those seasons where second year, the first year was phenomenal, and now a couple of things have happened that he's going to have to work through. And he's very much a timing and rhythm player. And when he can't play with timing and rhythm, he becomes uncomfortable both mentally and physically. And one thing that he's going to have to get better at in this league, and it's just, we just talked about Burrow, he's going to have to get better at being able to function when the pocket gets squeezed and muddied and noisy. And that's something that he struggled with this season. And it's impacted his ball placement, which was pristine as a rookie. We used to talk about that last year all the time, that he was so precisely accurate. This year, that's not been the case. He's missed too many throws that are routine by NFL standards. And this may not be an X and O comment, but just sitting here with my clicker and my remote and watching his tape week in and week out, he just looks like he's playing faster, like he's rushing himself when he doesn't need to rush himself. And I don't know how much work you've done on him up to this point. I know you still have 3 days before the game, but he's not a comfortable player. There's, and it's easy to say, well, his offensive line isn't as good as it was a year ago. And that's true, by the way. This was not Laramie Tunsil's best season, and they've struggled at times with O-line protection. But you know what? It's the NFL. You still have to function as a quarterback when there are bodies around you. And that's the next step in his growth and development.
Totally agree. That's what I see as well. What's weird, though, is there are times where there aren't bodies around him, really, and he's still missing guys that are open.
Yes.
I don't remember happening at all last year. Not at all.
And that's what I mean about him playing fast. It just seems like everything is rushed with him. He doesn't look comfortable.
Yep. Let's get to the Eagles and the Giants. Now, The Giants, I don't know what happened there, but Drew Lock and Malik Neighbors looked like Joe Montana and Jerry Rice against the Colts last week. Meanwhile, for the Eagles, it sounds like they are going to rest some guys. Nick Sirianni said that yesterday. Saquon Barkley not going to go for the record. You know, with Kenny Pickett having the rib issue and Hurts having the concussion in the finger, I'm expecting Tanner McKee to start, probably Ian Book to back him up. You know, finally, I guess on Sunday, Greg, people got to see what I've seen the last couple preseasons from Tanner McKee, which is, you know, a guy that looks like he belongs. I mean, to use your term, when I watch him, he looks like a comfortable player. Like a lot of times it seems like pre-snap, he has a pretty good idea where he's going to go with the ball. I've seen some quotes from him, and it's kind of simple, but he's like, yeah, I saw that A.J. Brown had man-to-man, so I knew that's where I was going to throw it. You know what I mean? Like that sounds pretty good to me, Greg.
Well, it's funny because I went back and I looked at my evaluation of him coming out as well, just, you know, because, of course, I get asked about him. You know, the guy threw 4 balls, but it's funny how all of a sudden you get asked about Tanner McKee. And he was a really intriguing prospect because he's not a mover. He's not a great athlete. He's obviously not a creator and a playmaker, but he's got really pretty refined pocket quarterback traits. He's refined, he's nuanced, he's the kind of quarterback that makes the right kind of throw to the right receiver at the right time. He did that in college at a level you don't normally see from college quarterbacks. He's an easy thrower. He's got plus arm strength, and you know, as you said, he probably recognizes things. He's always been that way. He's a ball distributor. And I think he probably has to be well protected and secure. Now, you and I are not saying he's going to be the Eagles' starting quarterback going forward, but obviously the Eagles have a very good O-line. But, you know, he's one of those guys that looks like he just knows how to play the position with the detail and the nuance and the disciplined craft nature of the position that I always feel is kind of required to play the position at a pretty high level in the league.
Yep, I totally agree. He and having met with him for the preseason games, a very impressive young man. I mean, very. You talked to him about his mission. His mission was to Brazil. So, which was crazy. When they played there earlier in the year, he spoke fluent Portuguese. And so it was like the ideal team for him to be on in that game. All right, what about some of these other games that really matter, Greg? It's the Chiefs against the Broncos. Broncos have come off a couple losses. Oh, Greg, speaking of that, I had no idea Bo Nix had that in him. That was a 70-yard throw in the air. You didn't tell me that. You didn't tell me Bo Nix had that.
Well, Bo Nix showed, and I've talked about this throughout the year, and my good buddy Kevin Harlan even referenced me a number of weeks ago doing a game. I guess he heard me talk, and I said, Bo Nix this year showed better arm strength than I think we all thought he had, that even I thought he had watching his tape at Oregon. And I think that's been the case all year because obviously that was a deep throw, but he's thrown this year a ton of those deep dig balls, and those are arm strength throws. I remember talking with Joe Flacco years ago, and Flacco said those deep digs, when you've got to sit on your back foot and drive the ball, he said those are the real arm strength throws in the NFL. And Bo Nix has shown the ability to make those throws. And obviously he made that deep touchdown throw to Mims. But, you know, keep one thing in mind. I know the Chiefs are not going to play people, but the Broncos lead the NFL in quarterback sacks. They've got a good defense. They've got a lot of guys up front that can win one-on-one, and they create pressure concepts that give those guys one-on-one opportunities. Two guys that aren't talked about very much because we always think about edge rushers, Ross, and you'll appreciate this, are Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers. Those guys can win one-on-one versus offensive guards. And I don't know if Tooney, who's been playing left tackle, obviously, but I don't know if Smith's going to play, Trey Smith. So I don't know who's going to play for the Chiefs. But those two guys, Allen and Franklin Myers, can win one-on-one versus guards.
Greg, you will appreciate this, and I want the listeners, the next time they watch these guys play, two guys that jump out to me. Falcons right guard Chris Lindstrom.
He was great this week.
Yeah, and Broncos D lineman Zach Allen.
Yeah.
They have elite initial quickness. They win with their initial quick. There is no drill at the combine that shows how twitchy your first step is, right?
Yeah.
There's shuttle and all those things, but those guys, they win the first split second of every play. It's really, really impressive and fun to watch.
It's funny you mentioned Lindstrom because I watched that tape yesterday, and I've watched the Falcons pretty much all year, but obviously, I'm making it a point now to watch it because Penix, it was his second star. And I got to tell you, normally I'm not charting, offensive guards. Obviously, I can't watch every position in detail. I just can't. I don't have that kind of time. I'm one person. I'm not a scouting staff. But Lindstrom just jumped out. I mean, particularly in the run game, just the way he was part of combo blocks and just how quickly he got to the second level. I mean, he just jumped off the film to me. And I know he's been doing that for years, but he's a really good guard.
He really is. I don't think he is an elite one-on-one pass protector, but as a run blocker with what he's asked to do, it is extremely impressive. Check him out on social media. Greg, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but next week we'll be breaking down 6 playoff games. It'll be incredible. We'll be able to look forward and really just focus in on these games. Check him out. He is the great Greg Cosell, at Greg Cosell, of course, on social media. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.
All right, Jack, we got the New Year's flash sale going from my friends at West Shore Home, in particular the website westshorehome.com/Ross. I now have done 2 bath remodels. I've done 4 doors. If you just feel the doors, if you hear the doors, you actually don't know that your doors aren't good until you get new ones. I don't know how else to describe it. By the way, by far the best return on investment for if you're ever going to sell your house is those entry doors, but also the new showers. People love going into a house and seeing those new showers. So here's the deal. 20% off all projects. Plus, to start the New Year's off the right way, they're going to give you an extra $500 off. Plus, you still get the $1,000 off when you go to westshorehome.com/Ross. And you get to see what my house looks like. westshorehome.com/Ross, westshorehome.com/Ross. Smirnoff knows there's no I in football. Football's a we thing. An experience best enjoyed together with good drinks and good folks. Smirnoff's the world's #1 vodka and an official vodka partner of the NFL. And this is a great week to enjoy some Smirnoff cocktails. It's New Year's Eve. It's New Year's Day. It's college football playoff. It's NFL Week 18. This holiday, when you're enjoying the game and your cocktails, please make sure to drink responsibly. Smirnoff, we do game days. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age.
Tux Takes.
All right, Ross. The Sugar Bowl between Georgia and Notre Dame was moved back a day after the deadly New Orleans truck attack.
Right, and not, we usually talk primarily NFL here on this show, but I think the college football playoff is a big deal, and I also think, a game like this getting moved back is a huge deal, and I just wanted to mention this because a fellow Princeton football player, Tiger Besh, who was an all-Ivy League returner, graduated in 2021, which means he's 25 years old maybe? He was one of the people killed in that attack, and I don't really know what to say other than situations like this are absolutely infuriating, and I am open to any discussion or productive dialogue regarding what we could do better to try to prevent these situations, because you've got a young man. I can't recall if I've ever met him or not. I probably have, to be honest with you. I probably have. But, I meet a lot of the Princeton players. I go back like once a year. I don't know how many, which guy I always meet, but I've watched him play a lot. And, a guy like that had the whole rest of his life to do big things, it just, it really breaks my heart. It hurts.
Shifting directions, Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni announces he will rest some of his starters, including Saquon Barkley, meaning no rushing record there.
Curious how you feel about this, Jack. You're a younger guy. You're 24. You live in Philly suburbs. I know it's been a major topic of conversation. What did you want to see them do?
I mean, it's tough because if he got the record, it would always, no matter what, be an asterisk because of the 17th game. Same way Eric Dickerson technically should have his because he had 16 games compared to OJ in 14 games. I think it's just the second anybody gets hurt, because the risk wouldn't be just Saquon, it would be Lane Johnson, who like anybody else on that offensive line. If any of them got hurt, it immediately is not worth it whatsoever.
So I think you could convince me. You could make an argument either way. And I think you could convince me, hey, this is a chance at history, and it's important to the guys, and it would be a good feel-good moment going into the playoffs. I think you could convince me of why they should do it, right? But I do think the only way you really look silly is if one of your best players gets hurt going for a record and you end up not having them available for the playoffs, and then you get second guessed forever, right? Like you might get second guessed for a week if you don't break the record with Saquon, but you get a guy hurt and then you lose a playoff game, you'll get second guessed forever. And everybody that was saying go for the record, they're the first people that will be critical of you if somebody gets hurt in a game like this. I think I would make ultimately the same decision Sirianni did.
Speaking of injuries, Packers cornerback Jair Alexander, he has his knee scoped, unlikely to play again this season. The Commanders, they activate Austin Eckler from IR.
Saw that. Yeah, that's interesting about both those guys. Eckler can certainly help the Commanders, especially in the passing game. And then for Jair Alexander, it's just been weird, man. I don't know what the deal. I feel like this is the second or third time where he's had like these mystery injuries where he doesn't feel comfortable play, and now he has to get it operated on. Doesn't sound real good, that's for sure. What does sound good is a Picks Friday tomorrow with every single game, Week 18 in the NFL. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. You know I love it. You know I want you guys to get it for your significant other for Valentine's Day. Backofficescheduler.com, human.nyc.com, Sporticulture.